Advise anyone in the public gallery that they're welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode and that all devices are muted. It is not permitted to take photographs or record any part of the meeting. Clerk, are you aware of any apologies for today's meeting?
No.
Okay, there's no apologies. I know a few members are running slightly late, and we do have Declan Muir joining us from Zoom. Thank you, Declan. I'd like to remind you of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Does any member have any interest to declare in relation to any of today's agenda items? No. Okay. Thank you, members. If anything comes to mind during the committee, it is quite okay to raise that. So, Chair's business. Item number 1, on pages 6 to 10 of your pack, to the Clerk's memo dated the 12th of September. It provides a draft response for our considerations on the AERC review of Assembly Committee engagement on cross-cutting executive strategies. Members, you will recall that we considered this at our meeting last week, and I advised that I had met with CAMS as part of the CLG response, not this committee's response. We agreed last week that the Clerk would bring a draft response for this committee to consider today. Members, have you any additional examples, having looked at the Clerk's draft, that you wish to add to the response? Are there any comments to make on that draft? Are there any issues that you want to raise before I sign that off?
Chair, can I raise one? It's a very minor issue. At example 2, under scrutiny, the opening line there is very much a declaration on behalf of the committee, which, with respect, and I know these things can be difficult to frame, I'm not sure we took a definitive decision in terms of that. I certainly don't remember any vote on a decision in terms of that. So maybe if the wording was something like considered concerns over the amount of interdepartmental responsibility, or keep the words there, encroaching on the remits of other departments, or understand, just slightly different emphasis on the wording, I think, there. To make it.
Not aware there was any vote. I think that from my assessment of it, it was unequivocal. There was no kickback. That's what the feelings were. But you're absolutely right, John. There was no official vote taken on it. So
I need to stress for members across who have raised this, I'm not in any way underestimating their concerns, which they have articulated very well here. It's just the sort of committee decisiveness of it. Might need to be careful. Also, the fact that there are legal implications and other things around this. Yeah,
I'm content. Any other points? Any other members want to make on that? We're content with the changes suggested by John. Yep. And Clerk, you're happy enough with the wording there?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, members. Item number 2, recall at our meeting on the 8th of May, Paul Crawford briefed us on his report, the Sheep Scab in Northern Ireland update and a path forward, which we all found very informative. For your further information, I refer you to a copy of the thesis from Paul Crawford which is called Towards Improving Medicine Stewardship in the Northern Ireland Sheep Flock, starting at page 11 of your pack. Have you any comments you content to note? Thank you, members. Agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting on the 11th of September. Refer to the draft minutes of our meeting dated 11th of September, page 489 of the pack. Have you any comments? Are you content with the minutes as drafted? And if you are, I will sign them and they will be published on the website. Content. Thank you, members. Let's sign those. What's it? 18th. Hasn't changed since I got up. Okay. Matters arising, members. There are no matters arising today, unless anybody can. They're different. No. Okay. So we'll move on to agenda item 6. Agenda item 6, members, is the Agricultural Schemes Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025 and a departmental oral evidence session. The statutory rule is to be made under section 5.2b and then subsection 6.1f and 9 of the Agriculture Act Northern Ireland 1949. Not sure if any of us were around for that one. As you will have seen, the briefing paper from the department highlights that upon the review of the Horticultural Pilot Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2025, the Examiner of Statutory Rules noted that a number of other regulations would also need amendment. Members, as would be usual, I would now ask you to agree that we go into a short closed session with Angela Kelly, the Examiner of Statutory Rules, before we hear from the department. Angela will give us the background to this, as she has been in discussions with the department regarding these issues. Are members content? Thank you. Thank you very much. Closed session. Okay, Sarah? Okay.
Just ask agreement.
Okay, members, that's us back in public session. So just before I move and seek your permission to move to agenda item 9 at this stage, just to have on the record that we didn't have the session with the Examiner of Statutory Rules. She is unavailable today due to illness, and we will return to that after the session we have with the department, and perhaps seek the ESR to attend maybe next week's meeting, if that's okay. So turning very quickly then to agenda item 9, which is the Departmental Written Briefing consultation on unlicensed recreational fishing for crabs and lobsters. I refer you to the briefing paper, including the consultation document from the Sea Fisheries Policy Branch, which starts at page 571. The Department intends to launch a 12-week public consultation on the proposals for additional management measures for unlicensed recreational fishing for crabs and lobsters to determine the impact of recreational potting and to consider in future stock assessments. For background, the unlicensed fishing for crabs and lobster regulations in Northern 2008 aim to prevent commercial-scale exploitation under the guise of recreational fishing by permitting individuals without a commercial fishing licence to fish for certain crab and lobster species in Northern Ireland waters under specific conditions. The draft Fisheries Management Plan, FMP, for non-quota shellfish species has shown the evidence gap on how to determine the impact of recreational and unlicensed fishing on crab and lobster stocks in Northern Ireland. To address this data gap, it is proposed to require recreational fishers to register with the Department, that all pots should have unique marks and tags, and for catch returns to be submitted. Members, the position in England is that a number of inshore fisheries conservation authorities have permitted arrangements for recreational potting activities to regulate the scale and impact on marine ecosystems. In EU member states from 2026, recreational fisheries will be required to be registered and to record and electronically report catches of species and stocks that are subject to conservation members. Have members any comments? Are you content to note that one? Content to note? Yep. More details will emerge. Thank you, members. Item 10 is a Departmental Written Briefing, Fisheries and Water Environment Bill, Water Quality Policy prior to consultation. Members, starting at page 584 of the pack, refer you to the briefing providing an update on the policy proposals and the underlying intent of the protection of the water environment aspects of the bill. The 8-week public consultation process is currently live and will close on the 6th of November, and it is anticipated the bill will be introduced to the Assembly mid-2026. Members, as we noted last week, the consultation on the fisheries and aquaculture policies aspect of the bill closed on September 11th, and water quality is a separate consultation. For background, the regulatory framework for the management, supply and quality of water resources in Northern Ireland is established by the Water Northern Ireland Order 1999 and the Waste and Contaminated Land Northern Ireland Order 1987. The implementation of the existing programme of measures in the current River Basin Management Plan falls to a number of key stakeholders, but it is acknowledged that everyone has a role in delivering towards a more sustainable use of water resources. Members, DAERA states that active engagement between delivery partners and stakeholders is required for the successful delivery of measures through partnership and catchment projects. It's proposed that the overarching framework to support this approach in the 4th cycle of the River Basin Management Plan will build on the 4 key pillars outlined in the Loughney Action Plan, which are education, investment, regulation and enforcement. Members, the proposal emphasises the main focus should be on prevention. However, it includes enforcement action as a deterrent, aiming to provide one, a consistency of approach with maximum penalties in line with equivalent offences in other jurisdictions, and additional enforcement mechanisms by providing the power in primary legislation to make regulations at a later stage to introduce fixed penalty notices and fixed and variable monetary fines within existing legislation. Have members any comments? Are you content to note at this stage? More information will obviously pertaining. Members content at this stage? Thank you.
Correspondence, we're still waiting for
Okay, we're going to move to correspondence before we return to the main agenda. I refer you to correspondence memo at page 589 of the pack. Members, I refer you to pages 590 to 594 of the pack, to correspondence dated the 3rd of July and a communique from the Minister regarding the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, the EFRA Interministerial Group meeting on the 23rd of June 2025. Are you content to note? Thank you, members. Next item, I refer you to 43rd report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, starting at page 595 of the pack. Report does not cover any SRs of relevance to this committee, and are you content to note? Okay, members, I refer you to pages 604 to 607 of the pack for correspondence dated 29th of August that the committee has been copied into from DAERA to the Chair of the House of Lords, Northern Ireland Scrutiny Committee, providing a further update in the following matter within the scope of the Windsor Framework. And that is amending EU regulations as regards certain market rules and sectoral support measures in the wine sector and for aromatised wine products. Does anybody know what? Can anybody tell me what aromatised wine products are, John? No. Buckfast, maybe. Other brands are available before I get into trouble. Are you content to note, members? Yeah. Thank you. Members, next item, refer you to a copy of the Gangmasters Labour Abuse Authority annual report and accounts for the year ending 31st of March 2024, which starts at page 609 of the pack. Are you content to note? Thank you. Members, refer you to page 701 of the pack to an invitation from the Sustainable Energy Communities NI to attend a showcase on Wednesday the 22nd of October at Ballamackay Sports Academy in Lisburn. The showcase will highlight the experience and impact of its project to encourage local communities across Northern Ireland to promote sustainable and low-carbon energy solutions. I have already seen some of that up there at the Sports Academy. It's very, very good. They've done an excellent job up there. So, members, unless other members wish to attend the event, if the committee are agreed, I'm content to represent the committee at this event in my constituency and be accompanied by the clerk. Members are more than welcome to attend that. I'd love to see you there. Thank you. Thanks, guys. Members, refer to page 703 to 708 of the pack to correspondence dated the 4th of September that the committee have been copied into from an individual to the Crown Estate regarding concerns in relation to Dilapidation Bill Limited. Are you content to note? Yep, happy enough. Members, refer to the latest ISNI delivery tracking system investment activity report dated the 31st of August, starting at page 709 of your pack. Any comments to make? Are you content to note? Thank you, members. Members, I refer you to September 2025 pivotal report starting at page 714 of the pack, providing an independent assessment of the Northern Ireland Executive, including reviewing progress against the 9 programmes for government priorities and any other departments, any other actions by departments. Are you content to note? Any comments? Okay. Members, we've gone through the items of correspondence. Are there any other items that you wish to discuss, or are you content?
Phil?
Content. Thank you, members.
Item 6, that's one slide.
Okay, members, if you will now track back to agenda item 6. Yep. Okay. So,
Chair, just wish to say to the department officials that we'd hoped to hear from, and we haven't, so therefore there may be more questions than we wanted.
not a bother. Okay. Okay. Members are referred to page 508 to 515 of the pack for the SL1, the draft SR, and the explanatory memorandum. Members, the Department intends to make this SR under the negative resolution procedure to implement technical amendments to existing legislation, which has been introduced as part of the Sustainable Agriculture Programme. Okay. Members are referred to the 44th report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, starting page 11 of the pack. The report refers to the following SRs that the committee have previously agreed to pending this report. That's SR 2025-103, the Horticulture Pilot Scheme Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025, SR 2025-112, the Agriculture Student Fees Amendment Regulations 2025, and SR 2025-126, the Environmental Protection Single-Use Vape Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. As members are aware, we weren't able to hold the session previously with the Examiner of Statutory Rules because she was unavailable, so we're possibly going to return to that, Zita, if that's okay. It's something maybe you're aware of, but it'll probably come out in our further conversations. So DAERA has confirmed that it will amend this SR to more fully align its provisions with what we have been alerted to. That's because of the parent act. The Agriculture Act is from 1949, and obviously there's been significant changes from then. And then the Department are going to make similar amendments to the Beef Carbon Reduction Scheme Regulations, Northern Ireland 2023, and the Suckler Cow Scheme Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. So members content to note that what has went before us so far today, and then I will welcome Zita Hale, the Deputy Director of the Agriculture Policy Division, to brief the committee. Members content. Thank you, Zita.
Okay. Yeah, well, as you've just mentioned, the Examiner of Statutory Rules brought it to the Department's attention that amendments will be required for the Horticulture Pilot Scheme Regulations 2025 so that they could more fully align with the provisions of the parent act used, the Agriculture Act of 1949, and that similar amendments would be used for the Beef Carbon Reduction Scheme Regulations 2023 and the Suckler Cow Scheme Regulations in 2025. So really, there's 2 proposed changes to each of those SRs. Firstly, we clarify the powers of authorised persons in each SR, so we give a definition and link it back to that the authorised persons' powers are in pursuance of Section 40 of the Agriculture Act, and really what that does is give detail to those powers that already exist in that primary act. And we also removed the offences and penalties regulation for each scheme. So that was the level 5 fine of £5,000 for persons guilty of obstructing an authorised person or a person accompanying an authorised person. And we removed the level 3 fine of £1,000 for an applicant, employee, agent or contractor or tenant of an applicant guilty of not assisting an authorised person, because in the view of the examiner there was sufficient provision for a level 3 fine already in the original Agriculture Act of 1949.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, members. I'm sure you have some questions. I have a question for you, Zita, if that's okay. The need for this SL1 appears to demonstrate that the difficulties that the Department is facing having to rely on old legislation as the source of powers to make very new environmentally focused farming policies. Has the Department considered any ways around this? Or do we simply have to wait to the new Agriculture Act with more appropriate powers?
Well, I suppose what I would say is, some of our programmes we are relying on the Agriculture Act of 1949, but a lot of the new work streams are relying on the retained EU law and the Agriculture Act of 2020. So that's why it's not all of the regulations that have been made under the Sustainable Agriculture Policy where we found this particular issue. But we're doing our best to get programmes out the door and use the primary powers that we have. But obviously there's conversations afoot in the department about when we can then resource and look at a future Agriculture Act.
Not to prejudice any ongoing proceedings by the department in terms of their inspection regime, could you give a worked example of where this operationally would demonstrate the need to change the legislation or update the legislation? What a worked example would look like that the department maybe have experienced?
I think, well, I'm trying to think of an example here. Certainly as the focus is more on environmental programmes and everything, we are amending the retained EU law at the minute, and thus far it's given us sufficient provision. But I think there is a view that further down the line, as we focus more on more environmental focus, that we will need those particular amendments to an Agriculture Act. But I can't give you an exact example off the top of my head at the moment.
And my last one is in line with the other UK devolved jurisdictions. What does this look like? Is it similar? Is it reflective? And in terms of the penalties, are they sort of aligned with other jurisdictions?
Well, anything that's using the retained EU law, if other jurisdictions are using the retained EU law, the fines and penalties are going to be similar. But other devolved administrations have brought in their own Agriculture Act, so I need to just go and look at how their offences and penalties provisions are framed in that, and then get back to you on that.
Yeah, could you do it? Just,
yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay, members,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Declan, are you hearing us? Okay, happy enough. Okay, members. Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, just a few light enough questions, just for clarity. So, why were the original scheme regulations not detected during the drafting or scrutiny?
Well, that was our interpretation of the Primary Act, that we had the powers to then define the offences and penalties, because there was provision in the Agriculture Act that it does confer powers to make regulations and to include incidental or supplemental provisions. So our interpretation of that was we could be quite specific on the offences and penalties. In terms of the authorised officers, really what we're doing now in this amendment is just giving clarity to powers that we already have. There was a concern that they could be misinterpreted, that we were going beyond our varies, but really what we're doing is just giving a bit of sort of flesh to what the powers of an authorised person has whenever they enter premises, and your inspection role and information that you can collate or count or record.
So importantly, what checks are now in place to ensure future regulations are legally sound before being enacted?
We do have a regulation group within the department that meets regularly just to test each other's regulations, in particular those that are using the Agriculture Act and the retained EU law. So we've raised that with that particular group, and we'll also be raising it then within other groups that perchance might be using this Agriculture Act as a primary power, because it hasn't really been used. The provisions that we're using now, for quite a number of years, we didn't have to use them,
Yeah.
but now we're relying more heavily on them, so we'll be bringing that to the attention to all groups within the department.
And just share just a few more points. We talk a lot at the minute, particularly in the wake of what's happening at Lough Neagh, about deterrence and enforcement generally. But does removing offence provisions in this case weaken deterrence and leave gaps in the enforcement process?
This doesn't actually, in terms of, weaken the powers of an authorised person. It just clarifies what they are. In terms of Lough Neagh, that's not my area.
I'm using that as an example. I'm just saying we've been talking a lot in the Assembly over the last 2 weeks about deterrence and proper penalties to ensure good enforcement. And I'm asking basically, will the removing of these offence provisions weaken those powers?
In many ways, what has changed here is the maximum fine has changed from 5,000 back down to 1,000, and that is for failing to comply with an authorised person. But there are other, I'm sure there are other offences and penalties in legislation for other parts of the department. I can't
Well, in terms of a deterrent, then, if it's dropped from the 5,000 down to 1,000, then that's a weakened enforcement action.
Yeah.
So, that's an issue.
There is a weakness there, but there's the other sort of penalties that are built into legislation in terms of if you don't adhere to eligibility criteria, the risks then to losing your farm sustainability payment or other payments. So I think they actually create a greater deterrent.
Yeah.
This is sort of belt and braces, and actually, had a few conversations around the department. Very rarely you maybe get to this particular stage with these particular provisions.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer, and you have clarified it for me. So will the changes have retrospective impact on farmers who may already have been penalised?
That's something we'll obviously be looking at in the department, and just to check if anyone has been affected. But as I have said before, we're only really as a department starting to rely on the Agriculture Act as a primary power, but I think there is a piece of work that will have to be carried out to see if anyone has been impacted by this.
Surely in the eyes of the law and fairness, if the department acted beyond their varies, then there would be a retrospective element for those who were penalised?
Well, yeah, I think it's something we'll have to look at.
Okay.
As I say, it's only very recently that for these types of programmes that we are using that primary power. I've made a few inquiries as to, how many people are actually affected by this particular provision. I think there's another piece of work to be done there just to see, does this have a significant impact on a number of people?
Okay, and you'll update the committee?
Happy to update on the findings of that.
Just a very final question, Chair. How will the department communicate these changes to stakeholders to avoid confusion amongst the scheme participants?
Well, we have a conduit through the agriculture policy stakeholder group, so we can certainly advise them and also maybe take their advice in terms of what types of communication would be required with stakeholders. But I think I want to make clear those provisions of the 5,000 and the 1,000 still exist in legislation where the primary power is European legislation, so the farm sustainability payments and those types of payments. So. But we'll certainly take the ag policy stakeholder group's advice on that.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Zita. And Aoife?
Thanks. So can the department confirm that the SL1 is solely to update departmental names and does not involve any policy or operational changes?
No, there's no operational changes.
Okay. Thank you.
And John?
I think, Chair, some of this was covered in the answers to Daniel's questions, but just for clarification, this is really a case of regulations that reduced in 2023 and 2025 being brought into line to fit with an act that was written in 1949. Is there any work ongoing towards agriculture policy or a new act that will look closely again at the limits on those penalties so that we can make progress on that? I think there will be across the department, but probably need to hear a bit more about that today.
Yeah, there's no current ongoing work on looking at that in terms of, provisions within the Agriculture Act, but it's something I can bring back to the department. Our focus is, as you'd expect, on, the priority is the rollout of the programmes under the Sustainable Agriculture Programme.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
Hey, members, any other questions for Zita? Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let you off easy today.
Huh?
Let you off easy today. Members, usually at this stage I would just ask if you're content if the department proceed to make the SR. Given that we didn't have the session previously with the ESR, I'm still going to put the question to you, but just to make it clear that I think we should still wait until we hear from the ESR to bottom out the issues or concerns that were raised there. So are members content that the SR is made, and the alternative is that we return to it after a briefing from the ESR, if we can factor that in next week? Content with that? We get the briefing from... Yes?
Just a quick point for myself, and I didn't want to put it to Zita because I don't think it's exactly her area, but we got a briefing a number of months ago. It was at the RSPB HQ in relation to the development of the new penalty matrix. Could we write to the department and just get a quick update to see where that works at?
100%. Yeah, the crossovers and lap over, that's a good one actually, to be fair.
Compliance.
Yeah, cross compliance, because there was a wee bit of a... Remember that session actually, and we had a briefing a week or two before where we were looking at the correlations between them. Good spot. Okay. Thank you, members. So we will return to that next week. Okay. Agenda item 7 then is Research and Information Service. There's a raised briefing on odour assessments. Refer members to pages 516 to 526 for the briefing paper, which provides an overview of odour assessments. As you recall at our meeting on the 19th of June in response to our query regarding the ongoing odour concerns at Cabra, NIEA provided us with odour impact assessment guidance, which was dated to 2012, which highlighted the use of the sniff test in odour assessments. We then asked RAISE to investigate the use of sniff tests by local authorities in GB and the Republic of Ireland. At the end of the meeting today, we will have a closed session to discuss the issues raised. And Suzie, you've already joined us, which is great. Okay, so are we doing this in closed session, Clerk? Or no, happy enough in session. Okay, Suzie, would you like now to brief the committee?
Thank you, Chair. So the following paper, as the Chair said, is in response to a request that was made back at the beginning of summer recess. Now, the remit of the paper is quite specific. It only considers whether sniff tests are conducted by local authorities across the rest of the UK and Ireland. It also provides a few examples of other technologies and approaches that may be used for odour assessments. I do appreciate that this is a complex issue, and it has somewhat grown legs since the production of this paper. So I just want to point out that this paper may be more narrow in scope compared to some of the more recent issues that have developed, but I am happy to discuss some of those at the session later. So just as context, local authorities deal with odour assessments at unlicensed sites, and the environmental agencies are responsible for licensed sites. So that would be those that are licensed under pollution prevention and control regulations. And while this paper does not consider assessments carried out by the agencies, it does make reference to guidance documents produced by them, which may be used and referred to by local authorities. So in relation to sniff tests, Table 1 in the paper provides a summary of the approaches used by local authorities in England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland. In summary, statutory nuisance is the main legislative tool used for non-licensed sites and odour, and Ireland uses air pollution law. Jurisdictions explored rely on public complaints. There does not appear to be routine odour monitoring, other than requirements for local authorities to inspect their area from time to time for statutory nuisances. And this is seen in the Scottish guidance produced by SEPA. Complainants may be asked to keep smell diaries, recording their perception of the smell and the effect that it might have on them. Officer visits and sniff testing are the standard tool used for odour assessment by local authorities. And there's a bit more detail in the blue box provided on the approach that's used by DAERA, and it's provided in its guidance as well. Now, odours from larger pollution prevention controlled licensed sites are assessed by the respective regulating body or agencies. He will conduct more scientific or lab-based assessments, and these are detailed in section 2 of the paper. Enforcement by local authorities is conducted through abatement as a statutory nuisance. And this is conducted throughout England and Wales and Scotland, but it comes in under air pollution legislation in Ireland. Now, section 2 of the paper considers examples of different technologies and techniques used in relation to odour assessments. The Institute of Air Quality Management explains that because the various tools and techniques have different strengths and limitations, they can often be used in combination. One of these techniques is described in section 2.1, olfactometry. This is the measurement of odour concentration using human panels and specialised equipment. It appears to be the main quantitative method for assessing odour, particularly from industrial sources, as assessed by the respective regulatory agencies. Now, there are different types of olfactometry. These can be lab-based or field-based. Dynamic olfactometry is lab-based, and it's used across the UK in line with the respective EU standard. It consists of a combination of sniffers and a lab olfactometer, which dilutes the samples with odour-free air. A panel of human sniffers inhales the samples, which are repeatedly diluted to the point at which the odour becomes just detectable. And this gives the odour concentration. However, odour offensiveness needs to be considered also, which according to Zita is difficult to quantify due to subjectivity. Where one odour may be offensive to one person, it may not be to others. So the fetal approach is used where the assessor must consider the frequency, intensity, duration, and the odour description or character, which is essentially the offensiveness of it, and the location. And this is used to try and standardise the approach and remove subjectivity. Now, another form is field olfactometry. This involves direct measurement at the emission site using portable handheld devices. These can be used on site for direct sniff testing, and they give quick site checks, but they are considered less robust than lab dynamic method, and they're easily impacted by weather conditions and have a short window for their use. Another one is electronic nose, or the e-nose. This is considered more of an emerging technology. It uses gas sensors to mimic human smell. It's one of the only forms used for continuous monitoring at sites and is considered supplementary to human-based olfactometry. Another technique is dispersion modelling, and this is shown in section 2.2. This method tends to be used for larger industrial odour. It predicts how an odour may spread, helping to assess the likely nuisance at the receptor sites. It uses equations and computer software to produce concentration maps showing how odours change at different distances, directions, and various weather conditions. And according to the Institute of Air Quality Management, there are some types of odour source that are not easily modelled, such as diffuse sources, and so the model results may not give a complete picture of the odour risk. That was just a quick run through the paper. I am happy to take questions, and as I said before, I appreciate the focus of this paper was quite specific, but if there's anything else that you want to discuss beyond that, I'm happy to do so even later.
No problem. I really appreciate that. I know that some members in particular in their constituencies are receiving lots of communications from residents. Had it in my own constituency a while back with the dumping stuff, and it was of significant note to the committee when we started to delve into it in terms of how the assessments are made. So thank you very much for that report. I'm going to start the ball on here with a question then, guys. It seems that in 2012 the NI guidance document only really covers the method of odour assessment by sniff testing at suitable locations in the local area around a facility or an installation. Would that be your understanding also that it does not cover lab-based olfactometry approaches, if that's how you say it? I think you said better than me.
I struggled. I think I pronounced it differently every time I mentioned it. But yes, having a quick look at the NIA guidance, it does seem to focus on sniff tests. Compared to the other guidance documents from SEPA, which is 2025 and quite recent. It does provide for these more lab-based scientific approaches. So yeah, it would suggest that the NIA guidance does just refer to sniff tests. It does refer to the Environment Agency guidance H4, which makes reference to these more lab-based, but whether NIA require those, it's not clear in the guidance document at the moment.
Is it through SEPA, is there any leaning towards what would be a best standard? Or is it site-specific and specific to maybe the industry or something? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't be completely clear on that, but in terms of the guidance document, it does provide a lot more detail and the pros and cons of the different approaches. Now, there is a standard approach under, it's an EU standard for the more common lab-based, which is the dynamic olfactometry, and so it has a standard approach across the whole of the EU. But within the NIA guidance, it doesn't make reference to that standard because it doesn't make reference to the approaches that would be that it would apply to.
Interestingly, in the dynamic olfactory lab-based test, they still use trained panel of sniffers. Was it obvious, or is there any evidence to suggest that the sniff testers that we use are trained?
Looking at the guidance, that doesn't provide any detail on that. I'm not saying that they aren't, but it just I can only go from the guidance document.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that would suggest that they are, which is interesting in itself. My final question then, from your research, I hope this isn't unfair to ask you, do you feel that the Northern Ireland guidance needs to be reviewed and updated? And you had hinted at that this is developing at the moment, even since the point of putting the paper together.
If we were to try and bring things into line with the other jurisdictions, certainly if we look at it from 2012 and also the use of the Environment Agency guidance, which is back from 2011. I mean, SEPA's latest review has produced guidance for 2025. So it's just whether NI would want to keep in line with the rest of those.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members are going to invite questions. Daniel, you indicated?
Yes, thank you for that presentation. I'm just wondering, in relation to local councils, have they got the resources and expertise in order to carry out reliable odour monitoring? We have a particular issue in Ardegarvan in West Tyrone, and it's rumbling on to great frustration, to be honest. And I'm just wondering, has the local authority got the necessary?
And that's certainly a good question, and I mean, it's not something that I have had correspondence with local councils, but I understand that it's a case of having somebody on the ground to go out to each site, and whether councils are fully resourced to be able to do that is certainly a question.
So would the council? I haven't been on site when this assessment's been carried out, but I'm wondering, has the council got the resources, and the equipment that's necessary in order to carry out reliable odour monitoring, or is it simply an officer driving on the Ardegarvan, sticking his head out the window, going, "Yeah, it's quite bad," and driving on? I'm just wondering how conclusive it is.
The requirements for local authorities would be sniff tests. The guidance does list sort of some of the criteria that a sniff tester should follow before they conduct the test. How that is followed up, how that is assessed and monitored, I'm not sure. In terms of the more scientific-based approaches, that would be conducted by the agencies, certainly in other jurisdictions, but that's definitely a question for NIA as to whether they conduct those for the licensed sites or larger sites that have odour issues.
And thanks for that. And I'd be interested to hear from NIA in relation to the chair. But why is out of hours monitoring so rare, given that residents report odours and it's often worse in the evenings and weekends, for instance? So should there be 24-hour availability for college, I suppose, is the...
Sorry, could you repeat?
Out of hours, so
out of
beyond
hours.
5 o'clock, those who may be offending, for instance, would operate out of hours because there's no one there to carry out necessary assessments, which has happened as well in parts of my constituency. So basically I'm asking why is the monitoring so rare out of hours compared to...
From local authority or from NIA?
Yeah, both.
From both. I suppose, I mean, I'm not really in a position to answer this, but the fact that it requires manpower to go out, and as you've alluded to before about resourcing issues within councils. Now, I did talk about some of the technologies that are available for ongoing monitoring at sites, but it's unclear whether NIA use those. A lot of these techniques are used in combination with, because some of them have certain strengths and limitations, but they tend to always be used in combination with human-based sensory techniques. So again, it's whether it's cost issues as well from both NIA and local councils to be able to perform that sort of ongoing assessment.
Okay, just a very final point, Chair. I'm just wondering, in terms of a solution and to ensure consistency across the 11 local authorities, would a standardised Odour framework improve consistency across Northern Ireland?
Well, certainly that's how Scotland have they've produced a framework, and their guidance as well alludes to that. So at the moment, the approaches that are used by each of the councils are set out in our guidance, but it's whether that is assessed to ensure there's any form of consistency. And I'm not sure whether NIA provide any of that, perform that role at all to ensure consistency.
You can see Daniel's picked up the scent of this topic. We are going to return to this, Daniel, and Suzie, at the end of this we're going to have a closed session, so some of that stuff, Daniel, might be particularly useful in terms of that closed session that we're going to have at the end of our committee, Suzie, if that's okay. And John, you'd indicated?
Quickly, and it follows on directly from that actually. It's on the theme of consistency. I mean, it's perfectly feasible that one local authority could have per capita twice the number of inspectors available at any time than another, and some people might have more out of hours cover than another, and that leads to a whole series of further questions. And it could also be that some areas will naturally need a larger resource than others because of the either number of complaints that arise there or the numbers of businesses and operators involved. I'm really keen, and it's possibly for our next session to drill down a bit further into the resource issue, and also how the guidance is followed across the various councils, as well as how the role of NIA dovetails with the practical work and follow-up work done on the ground by local councils, because I'm not sure that that's written down anywhere, and I think there needs to be an analysis of that, accepting that Suzie was not asked to do that in this report, so it's something, Chair, that we have to look at ourselves. Did you come across any of those things in your own research that you were doing for this piece, or would that have to be, in your opinion, Suzie, a completely separate piece of work?
Well, again, I'm happy to discuss it a bit further in the later session, but just briefly, I did come across the NIA business plan, which mentions in the target 12 with development of Odour guidance by 31st of March 2026, which I felt might have been of interest to ask NIA what that might involve, and in relation to being kept in line with the rest of the UK and down south, and in terms of local authorities as well. But again, happy to look at that a bit further.
Yep, thank you.
And yeah, Anya?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Suzie, for that briefing. Just in relation to, and it leads on from some of Daniel's questions there, just in relation to the guidance itself that you would have looked at, was there any specific, I suppose, timeline between once a report is made until a test is carried out? I would assume it's probably more of an operational based question, but I know obviously in my own constituency we've Cabra, we have Killishel, and on some days there's people waiting, making a report on a Friday, and maybe somebody's not coming out to Sunday or Saturday night. and a lot of the time you will hear the time it takes for somebody from NIA to get down from Belfast, over an hour. Sometimes it could be 6-7 hours. The smell has managed to drift off, or the wind has taken hold of it. But did you come across anything at all?
I had to refer to anything that was published, and I do appreciate that with internal processes and procedures there could be internal documentation and criteria or process that is maybe used without being published. So it would be of interest to find out from NIA if there is anything that does give more detail on timeframes, timelines and that sort of thing.
And just to lead on, and again, I know this was quite a narrow bit of research that you were tasked with, but in terms of enforcement, did you come across any numbers, any stats in relation to cases where NIA have issued enforcement? Maybe even compared to other jurisdictions?
No, I'm afraid I didn't look into that side of things, just looked at the vehicles under which enforcement could be used, just very briefly for the paper. So.
Thank you.
Good. And Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think one of the big issues is the out-of-hours assessments, because it appears that out-of-hours there's very little, if anybody, want to come out to do any assessments, and that seems to be a huge problem. Daniel did name Artie Garvin, it is a huge problem, and there's been numerous meetings with regard to it, but it's always out-of-hours where the main problem arises. And it appears there's nobody to come out, maybe a few days later, whenever somebody comes out, and at that time the smell kind of died away. And the other issues has been mentioned is the enforcement, because it appears that there's very little follow-up with enforcement whenever the smell continues. And in Artie Garvin, I wouldn't like to be living there, to be quite honest, with the way the situation is at the minute.
Yep. Tom left you like short, lost for words there. He's good at that. Okay, members, is there anything else on this? Now we're going to return to this in closed session to take the direction of the committee. And Suzie, if you come back.
Yeah.
Members, okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Suzie. Okay, members. Item number 8. Agenda item number 8.
Yes.
Okay, members, agenda item number 8, which is the Dilapidation Bill. So members, I'm going to refer you to your packs for the following nil responses in respect of the call for evidence from the Committee for the Economy at page 5 to 8, the Committee for Justice at page 5 to 9, and the Committee for Infrastructure at page 9 of the table of papers. For reference, a copy of the bill and the EFM is also included starting at page 530. I'll also refer you to table of papers at page 3 to a summary of the bill that was prepared by the Youth Assembly Secretariat. This was circulated for comment to the committee last Friday, and unless there are any further comments, this will be issued to the Youth Assembly members on Friday. A really good piece of work. Genuinely very pleased with that, members. Members, in addition, I just want to put down in terms of the committee, just want to reflect our thanks for the work that's went into that piece. It's really good to have that youth involvement. Yep. In addition, late yesterday the clerk received the draft guidance to accompany the bill, and that was sent out in a reissue of the table of papers, which starts at page 10. The draft copy of the guidance has been subject to legal scrutiny and will now also be forwarded to district councils for further comment. This is good news to see this guidance at this early. It is good news to see guidance at this early stage, and will also assist our scrutiny of the bill. Also, in their letters, officials draw the committee's attention to the recent meeting with DFC officials regarding the current wording in clause 11 of the dilapidation defective premises notice. DFC officials are concerned that clause 11 has the potential to cause confusion and conflation with the defective premises known and order 1975, which, as the committee will recall, was amended last year following the issues around Victoria Square. With the ongoing DFC work on new building safety legislation and recent post-Grenfell reports criticising the fragmentation in this area, officials have agreed in principle that clause 11 should be reworded to replace reference to defective premises with something more suitable. Minister Muir is content with this approach. Officials are currently engaging with the Office for the Legislative Council, who are of the opinion that this would involve drafting fairly minor cosmetic changes which would be acceptable to DFC. We have a briefing from the officials in the diary for the 2nd of October and can return to the guidance in clause 11 with officials then. I think this is going to be a significant piece of work for the committee, and you'll see that the forward work plan has potential meetings and scrutiny sessions peppered throughout. So are there any further comments on that? Are you content to note? Content to note?
Chair, we have 13 responses currently on the call for evidence, which still has a number of weeks to run. So.
Excellent. So Claire was just outlining with 13 responses so far. And through Michael's, I guess, Michael, you look after the committee Twitter account, don't you? We've been pushing this on there too, so if you wouldn't mind to get as much response on that. It's an important piece of work, particularly for high streets and rural dilapidation, which would be of significant import to us. So if you could all put your shoulders to that, it would be appreciated. It would certainly help us. Okay, members. Remember the forward work programme then?
Yes.
Okay. So members are referred to pages 22 to 25 of table papers for the draft forward work programme. Are you content that that's published? Yeah. Okay. Members, is there any other business? Look at me like that, William. I got William's eye there, you see. Okay, members, I'd just like to take the opportunity on behalf of the committee to wish our very own Sarah Priest from our committee to all the very best for her wedding next Thursday.
Oh, good luck.
Oh,
so we look forward to seeing the pictures. And congratulations, Sarah. They're absolutely delighted for you, really are. And all the very best for the day. Hope you get the weather and enjoy. Okay.
Are you giving her away, Robbie?
I'm not good. I'd keep her if I had the option. I'd keep her. Okay. Agenda item 14 is the date and time, place of the next meeting. Members, the next committee meeting is Thursday, 25th of September 2025 in room 21 at 10 a.m. Okay, so members, don't be going anywhere, Daniel. We're now going to go into closed session as agreed, and the meeting will be adjourned as soon as that is finished, and we will not be returning to public session today. So any actions agreed in closed session will be reflected in Chair's business next week. Thank you, members. On into closed session.